Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Power of Gen Z. I'm Jackie Cooper. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague and friend Amanda Edelman. We're from Edelman, which is the world's largest communications firm. And we work with a lot of brands, including Unilever, Microsoft, Starbucks, and Samsung.
We're here today to give you all an advanced preview of a new report that's coming out tomorrow, The Power of Gen Z, Trust, and the Future Consumer. This report dismantles a lot of commonly held beliefs about this generation. Number one is that they're not out to cancel brands, no matter what anyone else might think. YouTube is actually their most trusted platform, and only 12% say having influence and followers is an important goal for them. We're looking at an extremely pragmatic and sensible generation, and we want to give brands the opportunity to understand them better and harness their power as the rising consumer generation.
That's right. We found that more than anything, Gen Z wants to feel safe, secure. They want to work with brands to unite for the greater good and take care of our fellow human. For the next hour, we're going to be bringing in a host of experts and creators to discuss this reality and uncover the true power of Gen Z as a rising consumer generation and the potential for brand and Gen Z collaboration. We'll be talking to Muse, co-founder of Muse Recordings, Gabe Lee, decorated country music singer and songwriter, Maja Vujinovic, thought leader in cryptocurrency and digital finance, and Nyma Tang, celebrated beauty blogger and beauty entrepreneur. Let's bring on our very first guest. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, Jackie. Hi, VidCon.
The cheeriest face always, Mike. So lovely to see you. For those of you that don't know, Mike is the co-founder of Muse Recordings, a pop culture expert and change agent. By intersecting politics and pop culture, Mike uses his platform to create social change by shaping discussions, debate, and future thought leaders. He's the host of the very popular Mike Muse show on Sirius XM. So, let's start big picture. What aspects of this generation stand out to you, Mike? What do you see as their defining characteristics?
This generation is not afraid. This generation, to me, is busting norms. You know, Jackie and Amanda, I grew up in a generation where we followed order. I come from a generation where you wait your turn, you do the work, you get promoted, you wait to knock on the door, you wait to be asked in. I feel a generation just jumps all those things, busts up all the norms. They don't believe in waiting. Ironically, without any intention, I had a call, informational, with the Gen Zer this morning. Someone's trying to get into the sports world as a sports agent. And he literally said to Amanda and Jackie that he doesn't want to start at the bottom. This idea of a mailroom is just beyond him. So he believes that he should be at a higher starting position than at the bottom. Interning for him is just out of the norm. And he meant that with a very sincere, straight face. Like the idea of working in a mailroom at an agency and then working up as an assistant, then getting promoted, he want no parts of that. And I thought, ironically, I'm going to be talking to a bunch of Gen Z about Gen Z today. And I actually couldn't wait to use him as an example. But for me, that is what this generation represents. Just unafraid, rule busters, and not subscribing to social norms.
What did you tell him, Mike?
I know. I think you're putting him on blast right now, so I'm curious.
I did it as diplomatically as I could, Amanda, Jackie, but basically I was like, you're crazy. I was like, we all have to start somewhere. But I told him that, but I did it very diplomatically. And I said, as you begin to have more conversations and informationals, I highly suggest that you be willing and be open to start at an entry-level position and to work your way up, as many of us have had to do. But I told him most part is have that passion and that capacity to want more, but just balance it more with a little bit more diplomacy of understanding that he will be talking to individuals who had to wait their turn. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with either, but just to be mindful of his audience.
That's a good middle ground, very diplomatic response. And actually that's perfect because I think that fits nicely into this theme that we saw in the data of this tension among Gen Z between me and we. And on one hand, I think the perception is that Gen Z is an incredibly individualistic generation. And literally the anecdote you just told us is about this person who believes in himself enough to skip the line, quote unquote. But on the other hand, there's so many data points in our report that point to this generation that actually thinks about itself in a really collective way. And in general, the themes that we're seeing in Gen Z are extremely globally oriented. So there's this we perception and sort of, globally important topics. So, I'm curious for you how you reconcile and think about that tension.
That's such a great narrative that you pulled out of the data sets, Amanda. I think that we're just in this very interconnected global society. And so as a result, we have so much access to information. So we literally are this global community. Before it was more metaphorical, but now it's a literal narrative of that we are globally and interconnected. And so as a result, we're going to be in this incredible positions to be in groupthink and share larger ideas, larger principles, larger governing principles, or larger ideas for change. But at the same time, I believe there's so many subcategories even within. Take climate change, for example. There is this narrative that Gen Z loves climate change, right? But yes, now we're seeing different subsects of climate change. So you have some people who really advocate for paper straws. I do love my good plastic straw, but there are some people who advocate for polar bears. And there are some people who advocate for water and to making sure we protect the oceans. But then we have other individuals who are advocating for environmental justice, making sure we have clean air and clean water so that we don't get upper respiratory system, to make sure we have equality in trees in certain urban-centered neighborhoods that has inequities of shade. And so as you can see, just in that example alone, the global collective is climate change, but the subgroups are plastic straws, polar bears, water, clean air, and trees, right? And environmental justice. And so I think that is really reflective of what this generation is that they can be broad, but then they can also be very specific to what is their identity and what caused them to make moves on change.
And I think that's reflective of some, preternatural maturity to understand, you have a specific issue that you're really passionate about, but this is how it connects to a broader issue that might affect people, 5,000 miles away. So I think that's really interesting and a great connection that you make there.
It's also really interesting because I love that when I read your bio and when we first met, and you've been amazing in helping us as we put our advisory board together so that we remain smart on what we're talking about with Gen Z. And you talked about creator advocacy. And I just love that notion of the industry and, culture and advocacy coming together. So for the music industry in particular, how are you seeing causes being sort of woven into the creativity to the personalities that are rising to the top? Is talent and music enough, or do you need the purpose to get the impact to really sort of make it work?
I think it's and. I don't think it's or. I think it's and. Jackie, as you were sitting there, I was just naturally recalling thinking about Meg Thee Stallion. Meg Thee Stallion took off like a lightning rod. She represents Texas so well. She came in as this independent artist who garnered this mega success. And, we were saying all of her taglines, hot girl summer, which I'm so happy to know that she was able to protect her IP and to really get that established for her. But yesterday, or I should say over the weekend, she graduated from Texas Southern University. And I thought that in this era where here she is on Grammy stages, standing next to Beyonce, talking to Beyonce's mother, she's a face of currently Popeye's branded, I believe, hot sauce that they have, but yet here she is still taking finals, still taking exams, and putting on a cap and gown and walking across the stage. She didn't have to do that. But what that was signaling is the value that she sees in education. And what we're seeing now are celebrities actually putting their conscious, their things that they stand for forward. Even if maybe, I think she does nursing, I think she went and got her degree in nursing. And so we know she may not ever use that specifically, but what I do know is that she wants to open up long care facilities, right? And so using her brand, to use her money, to create centers to better serve an elderly and aging community, while at the same time letting her fans and followers know that she values education, and that can trickle down to them. And so it's like you can do both, right? You could be a musician and have a platform to stand on. And I think we're starting to seeing artists now do that, not be afraid to take a stand or position because there is an audience for that. And I think they don't want to have their handlers anymore over handling them, because this Gen Z audience, I'm sure your data suggests that, they don't like inauthenticity, right? They want you to be messy and get things right and may not use great verb subject agreement, right? And so that makes them more connected.
Yeah, the
Completely.
keeping it real is everything. And I think that I've worked with entertainment for many years, and there's always been, oh, we have to do the good thing. That is now in a completely different space, which is we have to do the thing that that person actually wants to do and is going to be real about it and stand behind it. This isn't like a tick box for, oh, what's your charity of choice? And we do forgive mistakes, right? So we better to be real and mistake, pull yourself up and get back on the road. So it's a really interesting shift and a good one.
So Mike, we have a question from the audience for you. So it's from Teddy. Thank you so much for your question. Teddy wants to understand some of the differences that we see between Gen Z and previous generations. And, you know, he uses the word strengths and weaknesses. Maybe we don't want to pass as much judgment onto these generations. But just what you think some pros and cons are, you know, from these different approaches from these generations.
Yeah, I think the Gen Z generation is more caring. I think they're more sensitive. I don't think sensitive is a negative thing. I just think that they're more of an empaths. I think they're more in tune to what's going on in society. I think they're more in tune to wanting to help. I think the generation before the millennials, I think it was a very me first generation. There's nothing wrong with that. But it was very look at me, see me, know me. But I think that was the first generation of really using social media, right? Really understanding that their voice in a platform. And I think they came to understanding a platform where everyone had a voice and wanted to utilize their voice and believing that everyone wanted to hear their voice. Where I think this current Gen Z generation is all about how do I use my voice strategically, right? And that I don't need to be the loudest in the room, but I'm going to be the conscious of the room. And I think that is the difference when it comes to that, to make sure, as you and Amanda, you and Jackie laid out perfectly, Teddy, if you heard them earlier, they were saying their data points suggested that this isn't about a cancel culture. This is about a culture that says, no, we don't want you to be canceled. We want you to do better. Because we recognize the power of your corporation and your money and what we can do strategically with your money for good. I think there's some of this generation that views capitalism as bad, where I think the previous or millennial generation sees capitalism as all negative. I know it's a broad strokes. I don't mean to broad stroke categorically, but just for conversation purposes in 10 minutes that we have, I'm going to do broad strokes, where I think this Gen Z generation is more open to capitalism, as long as the capitalists are using their money for good: art, culture, science, innovation, cancer, COVID, health, global impact of health and scale.
I would just actually add, as we move on, that our data shows that Gen Z expects the business to use their money and scale for good. So you're 100% right. We have the data points. And so you're spot on with that. There's a massive expectation. If you have the scale and you have the money, you should be there.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much. I wish that we could talk about this for hours. I'm sure that we could go back and forth for a long time. But that's all the time we have with you. We'll bring on our next guest, Gabe.
Howdy.
Hey, Gabe.
Hey, Gabe. Gabe, thank you so much for coming on. And for people who are just joining, to tell everyone a bit about you. You're a singer-songwriter from Nashville, and you create music in the country and folk genres. And you've released 2 albums, Farmland in 2019 and Honky Tonk Hell in 2020, that were both extremely critically acclaimed. And as someone who listened to them over the weekend, I recommend everyone do the same. You're missing out if you haven't heard Gabe Lee. But, to start, I want to ask a sort of different topic, a different type of question. And Gabe, it's around where you think the power in the music industry is. If, it's sort of around this topic of creator advocacy. Is it with the songwriters, performers, music labels? Who holds the power here?
Sure. I think the most important cog in the music industry is the listener. Now, obviously they wouldn't have things to listen to if you didn't have the entire industry itself. But I think the industry has built up this idea that you need publishers, you need a label, you need booking agencies for music to be important and for music to have emphasis. However, I like to believe in the more grassroots nature of music, and I think that is in community, in congregation around the audience and the fan and the listener. And ultimately, as we sort of grow our sound and develop our label and our brand and our image, we start to realize more and more that we're connecting with folks that are inspired by our music and are looking for inspiration that is past the regular old breakup song or the song about a truck or a song about beer, and I think there's a lot of value in that, and we're excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, I promise I didn't bribe you to say the listener, because that's the only value that I add in the music industry. But no, I think that there's some also really interesting parallels there between the listener having power in this industry and consumers having power. When we think about big brands, I think that there's some interesting insights around that.
Yeah, and it's amazing when we were talking, and I've sort of also been listening since I knew about you, loving listening to the music, that you've gone on this journey, that you've really, really been able to maintain your sort of personal voice in an industry that's quite homogenous in some ways. So I guess the question is, how have you kind of been able to keep your power as a creator? Specifically, you've got this, amazing journey as an Asian American man in an art form that's traditionally white or black and white. How does that work for you? And how does this relate to how you market yourself? And also maybe how do brands and companies relate to that? Does it affect much of the decisions you make or much of the way people reach out to you?
Sure. I really believe we're just starting to tap into our potential role as representing my heritage, but also being a lover and a Nashville native and a lover of country music. And that role has steadily, been presented to us over the last couple of years, and we're just now realizing that we're able to, in some senses, break a mold, but also continue to be a bearer of the importance and the legends and what makes country music so great. I personally, in Nashville, we have an amazing team that we built around us, and they're all very supportive of our voice and what we're developing, and no one's really ever asked us to represent something or be fake or inauthentic or represent something that we haven't ever championed in the past. So I guess that's all to say that we have a role right now that is a lot of fun, because we're just finally breaking through a little bit, getting good streams and connecting with folks that can kind of help us up to the next level. And once we've attained that, I think we'll be able to really continue building our community, fostering that idea of openness, perspective, introspection, joy of music, and maybe at some point see what it's like to really invite the idea of an international scope when it comes to music. Because obviously my heritage, I'm from Taiwan. When you think about East Asia, you don't really think about country music, but I'll tell you, those consumers, they're ravenous, and there's an extraordinary market out there for just about anything. And why not country music?
Yeah, I'm loving this, and I think you touched on two themes that we discussed with Mike. The first is these global trends, and so I love what you just said around how country music, it can appeal to people in East Asia, they're across the globe. There are so many common themes that entails. And the other thing that I want to pick up on and ask you about is, you mentioned community, I think 5 times in that previous sentence. And when we've talked previously, you've described your songwriting process as incredibly solitary. And I think country music actually embodies this interesting tension between community and individual, between we versus me. And clearly that's something that we've seen in a lot of this Gen Z data, as we previously referenced with Mike. And so I'm curious for you how that manifests, what that means, this tension between we versus me.
So the community of Nashville and the body of songwriters is, in my experience, extremely supportive. And that's hard to find. I mean, because I was in music school at one point, and it was extremely competitive, and folks would actively be undermining others in order to get ahead. And that's not an uncommon theme, I don't think, when it comes to competition. That's that's the point in a lot of ways, is to be better than the people around you. Now, I will say there's an extremely healthy sense of that among my community and among my songwriter friends, because we truly believe that our generation will lift each other up when we have the opportunity to. So while we develop our own sounds and brands and image, we don't as long as we're surrounded by folks that have a similar goal, and are, you know, in this community of Nashville, Tennessee, then we're very trusting in each other in a lot of ways to basically give each other the benefit of the doubt that we will ultimately attain these goals together as we progress, and not be jealous or bitter about someone else's success, as can be very common in entertainment, because folks get opportunities like this coming through the door, and you're just hoping that you're the next one. So I gotta put it up to my songwriter friends and my buddies. It's a great community.
Yeah.
We have a question, Gabe, that the audience has asked us from Jill. She says, what are some of the benefits / difficulties for Gen Z musicians? Does it parallel other types of creators besides music?
Sure. These days, I feel like the opportunities that are presented to creators at home is incredible. So, like, there are actually a ton of advantages. You contrast that with the way it used to be done, where you would just basically get in a car or a van and just drive for days on end to different shows and just try to sell a couple CDs or sell a couple records here and there. So the power that you have in your fingertips is incredible. However, I think that enables a ton of other people to participate in the conversation and in the genre and the language of music. While that is awesome, it doesn't necessarily mean that the entire scope of, let's say, country music, for instance, will be better for it. I think in the long run, yes, but at times you're going to run into oversaturation. You're going to run into a lot of folks doing the same kind of thing or imitating each other. And while that is not necessarily detrimental to, I think, the genre, it does, I think, hold it back in some ways. We were just talking about authenticity.
Yeah, sorry, Gabe. It just made me think about, how do you curate, what's good and what's bad? Mm-hmm. How do you curate that? And like, we've got creators on this session, listening in. Where's the litmus test? How do you know?
Sure. I mean, I can only speak from a songwriter's perspective in Nashville, but you do have opportunities to present yourself in songwriter rooms, at open mic sessions, and at co-writes, and showcases, music showcases. There's a lot of different ways a musician and a songwriter can test themselves. And if you keep hitting a wall, then you know that you probably have something to work on. And that doesn't necessarily have to be the way you play or the way you sing. Maybe you sing beautifully, but your role as a musician in Nashville is very scrutinized. So you meet tons of people every day, and socially too. Like, if you can't be a professional, if you have issues at home, I don't know, it could be anything. Like, then that might hold you back too. So I would say that as long as you're honest with yourself, you'll be successful, and that's hard to do sometimes for a lot of people. And I've just, again, been lucky to meet folks that have really, really believed in our art and championed it, and have helped us along the way, and we have a lot to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, Gabe, thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have with you. But again, thank you so much for your insightful answers and being a great panelist.
Thank you, Gabe.
Great. Hi, Maja. So Maja, thank you so much for being here. For those listening, Maja is Managing Director for O Group LLC, an investment firm focused on the impact and integration of new technologies. You're a thought leader around new technologies, including AI, blockchain, and cryptocurrency, Our conversation today will focus on crypto, and because there are such varying levels of comfort with the space, we'll leave a bit more time than usual for Q&A. So Maja, my first question is at the 3,000 level mark, which is, can you tell us trends about crypto and Gen Z? My quite superficial understanding is that it is much more widely used among Gen Z. If I think of the difference between if I ask my parents, are you in crypto? The answer is no. And then if I ask my friends' younger siblings, the answer 100% of the time is yes. So can you talk us through, trends of usage and just trends more broadly among crypto and Gen Z?
Yeah, sure. It's good to be here. And what an exciting time to be alive. Just listening to Gabe also, I kind of just want to touch on that really quickly, which is a really underlying factor of crypto, that most people are in there to help each other, which is really kind of different from a traditional financial system, and that anybody can create now, and there's always an audience for that creation. And so I think circling back to your question, what's really interesting to me is if we zoom out a little bit and think about what does that mean? Why are people so excited, right? Why are people so excited is because it allows a person skin in the game. Every time we have a skin in the game, being within a small family, within a relationship, within a business partnership, we give more, we create more, we are willing to contribute more. And I think what Bitcoin first allowed, and then everything else that came with Bitcoin, is just sense of ownership. And this is one of the first times in the internet that you can own something, and it's called the token, right? This is one of the things you can own on the internet, and one of small things you can own on the internet. There aren't many. And so when you have this, when this started a couple of years ago, I started to get involved in 2009, so really, really early. And then around 2013, 14, when I was at GE, at a large conglomerate that was moving at a really, really slow pace. That was a time of platforms, right? And at that time, I kept telling people there's not going to be any more platforms. What we're going to have is these individual creator economies, right? So trends that you will start, or you're seeing, and there will be more to see, is ownership of something I'm creating, ownership into something you are creating, ownership into something that Jackie's creating that I believe in, and also sense of I want to live and be with people and work with people that I like. I don't want to go into a job that I don't like and be around people that I don't like. Mm-hmm. I want to be creating and contributing into a concept, a vertical, a product, whatever that might be, right? And so when you have communities like that, this is really, really attractive. And there's, I just see this huge kind of wave, tsunami coming at us, and I've been seeing it for many years. And now it's just kind of the cat is out of the bag, and there's no stopping.
Yeah. And to follow up on that, I've actually never heard the phrase or the idea that people go into crypto to help each other. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I'll give you, I was actually explaining to somebody yesterday that is a really large asset manager out of New York. Mm-hmm. He said to me, but, well, we have this great business model and we have a lot of assets, and, we know we can have a really valuable token. And I said to him, okay, who gives a bleep, And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, do you have a community? Do you have people that want to contribute to that asset? Do you have people that feel ownership in that? How can they benefit from that? And the reason why I say that, Amanda, is because inequality in the world is very scary. And I'm getting chills as I say that. All of us here that are presenting and et cetera are quite lucky, right? But this is a scary, scary thing that is happening, and it can't end well. And so when I look at what's happening on the economic sense, and I look at that inequality, right? People that have money are going to make triple more money, and people that are just having jobs are not going to make any. And so people are realizing that. Gen Zs are seeing that. They've seen it with their parents, they've seen it with their older siblings, right? And they're seeing those types of struggles in centralized institutions that really get them in places. And so now they're saying, hold on a second. I can have the ownership in my own creation. Well, for me to actually have an ownership in that and to have the users, I have to do what? Collaborate. I can't be cutthroat. I can't not support a woman or an Asian guy or a Black guy or whatever you want to say. I have to really collaborate in this. And because if I want supporters, I have to be a supporter. So it's almost like you lead by an example. That's one of the examples. Second example is when I started in this, some of the early contributors, we've had millions of dollars of coming in pocket with each other through Ethereum without a contract. It was just trust, because everything is recorded on a blockchain. You could go back and say, okay, Jackie just gave me a certain amount of money for this project. Amanda just gave me that, right? And your currency is your reputation, not an NDA, not some lawyer and thousands of dollars of fees and whatever else, right? It is based on trust. So there are a lot of things that are moving into this concept, into this new decentralization that kind of are cultural.
It's really interesting that you say, that kind of connectivity and that, because this is often talked about, blockchain, NFTs, cryptocurrency as being kind of uncharted, and that it's a sort of very much like risk versus reward. In the Gen Z report that we're publishing tomorrow, we see that financial safety is unusually paramount. 68% are already saving for their future healthcare expenses. We even had that from a 14-year-old. So even with the inherent risk, how can crypto provide the security and safety that Gen Z is seeking?
Yeah, Jackie, that's also, that's surprising to me and not surprising to me. In one sense, because Gen Zs are sometimes so crazy as I see them, right? That they can seem irresponsible. But reality is, in everything they do, they are, because the world is moving so fast and the dissemination of information has already happened, and you're fed information from every single angle. They're realizing that they have to create their own future. The trust in government is very low. The trust in large institutions is very low. They've seen their parents and all the siblings. And so now what I'm seeing is, wait a second, this is the first time through crypto that I get to own something in what I'm creating. I am not investing in a financial balance sheet or in a financial document. I'm investing in creator economy. I'm investing in that token or in that product that is created by this group of people that actually supplies to those group of people, right? And I get to participate in all of that. So crypto, this is the first time in history we're having something like this happen. And crypto, because of its speed, right? If you look at where crypto started and when people kept saying, well, Bitcoin's never going to make it, right? But what makes Bitcoin work? It's trust in a system and a willingness for decentralization. Oh, and they said, well, DeFi is not going to work. Well, okay, great. Look where we are in DeFi, right? These are billions of dollars. Then NFTs are not going to work. Well, this is just, complete BS. Well, NFTs are just starting to work. And so crypto provides magnitude of possibilities for financial income, of not just you participating, but you creating your own token, right? We can decide that tomorrow we have a product that we think a certain amount of people will want to use for a particular utility. We can decide to create our own financial freedom, right?
That's incredible. So we're getting a couple of questions from the audience. I'll start with Sandra's question. She asks, how do you maintain trust in cryptocurrency when it feels like everything changes so quickly?
Good question. Have faith and learn. This is what I always say to people is don't depend on what people tell you. You have to learn. Crypto is another interesting example where you have to constantly be on a learning curve and you have to read. And yes, it is changing constantly, and there will be some things that will be completely new until some regulation comes in, right? And then other things that will continue running far away from regulation, and it will take a couple of years for regulation to keep up. So I think the only way to do it is you've got to learn. And that's another thing about crypto community is that I can't find anybody in crypto that doesn't know what they're talking about, right? It's powerful to see that.
Yeah, I have to say, all of my smartest friends are in crypto. That genuinely has been the light bulb moment for me to get involved.
So, like, your friends can understand it. My friends definitely can't understand it. And Stephanie's question is, Okay, so I'm a millennial and I struggle to understand crypto. What makes Gen Z such a powerful force in the world of crypto? You've touched on some of it, but can you expand on that a little bit in terms of this appetite for it and the bravery and the kind of, I guess you've answered some of it, like with the community and the bravery and learning, but it is a marked difference. And we've seen this in the data between the millennials and the Gen Z.
Yeah, it's a complete mind shift. It's a complete mind shift, right? They don't want to own real estate. They want to move from city to city. And I don't think that's just really for Gen Z. I'm not Gen Z. But there are people in my community who live the same, right? You want to have certain assets, but you want that freedom. And so Gen Zs are powerful because they stand up and they say, I want to get paid for what I contribute. I don't want for this centralized organization to only get paid. Also, by the way, I would like to vote and have a say on how this goes. And by the way, I actually have an idea and I think it's valid. And I think to Gabe's point earlier, right, there's always going to be audience for something. Now, obviously that as an investor, that makes me decide, okay, what project is better than the other, right? Some things are just great ideas, but they don't work in execution. But Gen Zs are powerful because they all together come in and say, no, actually, I contribute, I own, I do, I get paid, and I can create a vast amount of change. And that belief and self-confidence, Jackie, is something that is really addictive as well.
I mean, Maja, you've been amazing to talk to. I wish we could honestly do a whole session on this. I think we'd love to come back and do it. Thank you so much. We've learned so much. There's so much more to learn. I think it's an area that people really want to be, behind the curtain of it. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
We're going to go to Nyma Tang, which is incredibly exciting.
Hello.
To have you on. Hello and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. We're really, really so thrilled to have you.
Thanks.
I'm sure everyone here knows who you are, but in case there's someone who doesn't and isn't out there looking at everything you're doing, you're an incredible beauty blogger, an activist, particularly for darker tone women in the beauty industry. You've nailed a very popular YouTube channel. You review makeup brands and their darker shades of products. You've created your own shade of matte cosmetics. And you've collaborated with beauty brands like the amazing Fenty, Bobbi Brown, and the amazing Pat McGrath, who's someone I look up to enormously. So can we start with your personal story? What inspired you to pursue the career you've had? And did you even know it was going to be a career?
No, I didn't know it was going to be a career. When I first started creating content, most of it came out of frustration for the lack of products for people with my skin tone or similar to my skin tone. And that's really where it came from. I just started creating content, talking about why there needs to be products like available on the market. And I think the way that I did it made it so undeniable. Like there was no way you could just like brush it over or be like, oh, maybe, this could work. Like a lot of them didn't work. And I was not expecting it to be as big as it was. I sometimes still don't understand how it happened so fast, but I'm thankful for it. Not only am I able to create change, but I'm also able to, I changed my entire life, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to bring this back to, the questions, the theme. I think one of the themes of this conversation today is the we versus me. So when you started doing this and when you started in your career, how much of it was you sort of looking as an individual saying, like, I don't have the products that I deserve to have versus, thinking about yourself, as part of a broader community who, was bereft of the beauty products that they rightfully should have?
Yeah, I think when I first started playing in makeup in general, I always call myself a late bloomer when it comes to playing in makeup because I didn't start trying it until like I was like 21. And that phase in my life from around 21 to like 24 was very much so me because I was trying to figure it out. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that I could possibly talk about it and share my experiences online. And then when I decided that I wanted to create my YouTube channel, it was definitely a we. Like there was no doubt about it in my mind that like I wanted to, this was something that I've been dealing with privately for about 3 or 4 years now, and it's time to make a difference. I never thought I could be the difference. I just was like, I'm tired. Like, I'm going to rant to the world and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, and it clearly resonated with so many people. And I think that's very true to this generation, is like, there's less of a binary between we and me. And sort of by helping yourself and empowering yourself, you empower so many other people. So the me becomes the we.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it seems that it's kind of sad that the world needed a voice. So like that we're in the stage that you had to do this, right, because of everything that's happened. And one of the things that you touched on when we were talking, which I loved, was that, and you said you started this from frustration, but you've always done it in a really kind of elegant, beguiling way. You haven't come across, I mean, you've challenged, right, and you've trailblazed, but you haven't yelled. How did you decide how to step up and get that frustration to be like a positive force and put it into, and you were creative for change, but in a really very sort of seductive way?
Yeah, and you're right. When we were talking about this, I explained it in the sense of most of that is my personality. Most of it is just truly who I am as a person. I'm not really big on being over the top or like being overly expressive. And I think that helped a lot in the sense of the way that specifically Black women are policed, and that we can be labeled as aggressive and things like that. And sometimes that messaging gets like overshadowed by people's stereotypes and perceptions of people. So for me, it worked out in favor for me because that is truly my personality. I think that it's okay to let people express things however they want to express them. And if someone is that upset, like I've been there before, I've been that upset where I'm just like, okay, I'm tired. Like, I don't even want to like play games like today, but it's okay to let people express themselves. It worked in favor for me because of that's truly who my personality is and how my personality is. And I couldn't imagine trying to change my personality because of the fact that it would be not received in the same way. So, yeah. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyma. That makes a lot of sense. For all the people on the stream right now, a lot of them are content creators themselves. And so this question is a little bit practical and a bit personal, sort of oriented at that. And one of the things that you've so incredibly and successfully done is really change the power paradigm. And so I'm sure sort of as you were gaining traction, a lot of the power laid with the brands, and you know, in some ways you had to do what they said, and the power laid with them. One of the ways that I think you've really trailblazed is that you've changed that and you've vested power in yourself. And so, how did you do that? And what advice would you give to all the content creators on this call to do the same thing?
A lot of it comes from, there's a part of it that's like, obviously, if certain brands aren't meeting the standard, no matter how much money they throw, I cannot work with them just because they're not meeting the standard. Whether that's because in beauty, because that's what I do, obviously. Let's say their foundations don't work. What am I going to do with that? It's not going to do anything.
Literally can't use it.
Yeah, literally. So that's one part of it. And then the other part of it is I've always been really blessed to have a team that has instilled in me that this, because of what I do and because of how I do it and what the things that I speak about, I do have power, and they help me realize that I can say yes and no, and I don't have to do every single deal that comes across my table. And that is something that as creators, we have to learn very early on, because the world, like, it's so easy to get caught up and get lost in like every single thing, taking every single deal. And that doesn't always have to be the case. As if creators learn early on that they have the power, that dynamic will stay with you from the very beginning, versus like trying to reverse it. It is much harder to try and reverse that understanding.
Yeah. So it's almost like a mindset shift. And the other thing, as you were talking about having the people around you, I was so reminded of what Gabe said, actually, as he was talking about his Nashville community being really instrumental into creating his music. And I think that there's something really powerful about that seeming tension, but I actually think it's more of a synergy around, surrounding yourself with the people, the we, who empower you to be the me, empower you to be your best and truest self.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely believe in that. I think having the right people, like you said, around you telling you that you don't need this right now. You shouldn't take this right now. Or sometimes there's things that flow over my radar, and then that person's like, we're not doing that because of this and this and this and this, you know? So having the right team around you is very important.
Yeah.
I mean, some of what we do in our day job is that it might be the right thing to say, but it might not be the right time to say it, just because there's stuff going on in the zeitgeist or in the news that means that perception is bigger than reality. And so I think it's always good when you're inside, you know, you're a person, you're creating and producing stuff for the outside, but you also need to make sure that the outside's in the right place to receive. And I guess that takes us to a question actually from Michelle. And she's asking, what do you think brands can do better to promote racial inclusivity without coming across as contrived? It's a really interesting question because it's easily done, right? How does it not look tokenistic or contrived?
I think it truly begins with genuine concern. Like if you are genuinely trying to do better, it will come naturally in the sense of you will actively reach out to those creators. You will give them the chance to share their content, whether it's a partnership or a collaboration, in a way that is natural to them versus like, oh, we want your face, we want your skin tone, but this is the brief and this is how we want you to do it. You know, we just want to borrow your likeness. And I think a lot of brands sometimes don't understand that borrowing the likeness isn't gonna work. You genuinely have to be invested in that creator. You genuinely have to be invested in that community to make true change and to not feel contrived. It won't feel contrived. If it's done right, it will never feel contrived, because guess what? The community is going to be there to make sure when there's a bump in the road, they're going to be like, let's not do that. Let's pivot here. Let's do this, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's assuming that people and brands relate to the community, right?
That's true. If you don't relate, you need to go back and relate first and then come back. Don't try and force it.
I think for this too, there's something interesting around like the proof is in the pudding, if you will, of like there's so much tangible there. And that actually relates really interestingly into a data point in our report, which is that health and wellness and sort of personal beauty are two of the most trusted categories. And you know, our thinking there is it's all about the tangibility of it. Where like literally, Nyma, for you, like you do swatch tests on your wrist, like you can see, you know, who are brands that are creating or who are beauty brands that are creating you know, inclusive products versus the ones that aren't. And so for you, is this something, does that idea resonate where it's, you know, people want receipts, people want sort of evidence-based like proof?
Yeah, no, I think towards the end of like 2020, I was having a meeting with my team, and we had to go through the understanding that the world is shifting. It's been shifting for a very long time, but the community and the audience now aren't just going to take your word at face value. They're doing way more research than they used to, which is good. I've always been a proponent of like, don't take anyone's word as like the Bible. Go and do your own research. And I think the reason why health and wellness in the terms of like Gen Z trust is strong is because like you said, when I swatch things on my hand, you see it right there. Like there's no denying that. And it's easier access, like stories, like I can talk to people directly. I can be like, okay, it's a face-to-face interaction versus like when you think of like traditional celebrity media, it's very much so like just here, perfect, you know, and then go about your day and then that's it.
We have another question from somebody from Joy H. When do you think the PR marketing industry will catch up and reflect the diverse demographics of Gen Z? It's a good thing that the industry is predominantly women, but concerning that it's by far and overwhelmingly white women. Poignant for us too.
Yeah. When do I think that they will catch up? I think as social media, the reason why I think Gen Z feels like they're like considered like the call out like generation is because as we have moved into like this space with social media, every single generation, the more and more social media connects us, the more and more we just are not taking it. Like, and I think PR and marketing is already a very tricky space. I think I've heard a lot of PR companies being very scared, like tiptoeing and navigating, because one wrong move, you know, you end up on like the canceled list or something like that. I think it's gonna happen sooner than we probably expect, but it's going to come down to brands realizing that their cookie cutter workflow is not working anymore, and it's not going to keep working.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, we talk about being the human beings to represent the human beings that we're reaching out to. And I know that we're really aware of trying to do that around the world, because professional opportunities don't always reflect the human beings that we're reaching out to. So those things have to even up. We're trying really hard to accelerate that. But it's a good question, and one that we have to respect and take on more. So thank you for that question. So I think we're kind of at the end of our panelists. This has been like a roller coaster show of people. Yes. I think we would have loved to have talked so much more. Amanda, we've only touched on the sides, right? We need to make this a series.
I know. I want to have a specific, like with all four of you, I would love to have an hour. It can be taped or not, just I want it for me to explore more deeply all of these topics. Well, Nyma, thank you so much. You provided so many insightful answers to our questions. And I'm sure that a lot of people on this call have really followed you for a long time and have really benefited from all the thoughtful responses that you've had. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nyma. Thank you. So we're at the end. We've got the data coming out tomorrow. We definitely are amazed by the sort of power of Gen Z together. And I think we're going to be teaching some people about this data, right? That there's more to celebrate with Gen Z than fear, right, Amanda?
Absolutely. And just to say, like, one of the big findings in our report actually is that Gen Z is less cancel culture oriented than one would think. It's all about demonstrating, care and follow through with values. But cancel culture is really not people's first course of action, and it tends to be a bit overblown. So that was, for me, a more optimistically oriented finding. But again, everyone, thank you so much for attending this session. I want to give a shout out to all of our incredible guests, Mike Muse, Gabe Lee, Maja Vujinovic, and Nyma Tang. They're all so wonderful. And we're so flattered and honored that we were able to pick their brains for an hour. If you're curious about the insights in our report, please check out edelman.com/future-consumer. And we have more insights in this recording taped coming back to you soon.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.